Question number 11, Chris Hipkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Education. When did she first discuss the potential impact of Monday's 7.5 earthquake on NCEA and Scholarship exams with the New Zealand Qualifications Authority?
The Honourable Heke Parata.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, while my first direct contact with the Chief Executive of the New Zealand Qualifications Authority was approximately 8 a.m, I was in continuous contact from approximately 6 a.m. with the Acting Secretary of Education on the status of schools, including the likely impact on examinations, and I was concerned to ensure one source of coordination to minimise operational distraction in what was a very fluid situation.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
Why did she not ask the New Zealand Qualifications Authority to postpone all of Monday's exams at first light that day when it was clear that there was extensive but unquantified damage, serious aftershocks were continuing, many students had had little sleep, and thousands were anxious for their relative safety?
The Honourable Heke Parata.
Mr. Speaker, I was relying on the technical expertise of the New Zealand Qualifications Authority and their experience through the Christchurch earthquakes, and the advice I received from them was that 48,500 students were sitting NCEA that day, of which in the areas directly affected by the earthquakes, something just over 13,500 students could or might be affected, and their concern, which I share, was that while 3/4 of students were not in the areas directly affected by the earthquakes, they too would not be put at a disadvantage by the examinations being cancelled for all of them when there was a process to deal with those who might be.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
Does she think it's fair that students who had studied hard for an exam because they needed a good result in order to get NCEA for their future study and employment are either denied the opportunity to sit or have to sit when they're sleep deprived and still being shaken by aftershocks?
The Honourable Heke Parata.
Mr. Speaker, the emergency derived grade process, which was the one that was used in the Greater Christchurch area and is used for exceptional emergency situations, relies on the school using the assessments throughout the year to make the case. It is true that that is the process that is used, and that is the process that is being applied here.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
Why is she claiming that the derived grade process was used following the Christchurch earthquakes, which were in September and February, where there were no NCEA exams?
Good question.
Order. The Honourable Heke Parata.
Mr. Speaker, I am not claiming it. I am stating it on the advice of the New Zealand Qualifications Authority, where students' education academic record might be affected by emergency or exceptional circumstances. This is the process that is in place and was used during the Greater Christchurch earthquakes.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
Is she aware that the derived grade process will penalise those students whose internal assessments through the year do not necessarily reflect their true abilities because they may not have been as prepared and they may have been relying on their exams to get them through their NCEA?
The Honourable Heke Parata.
Mr. Speaker, in this situation, we are weighing up the fact that 3/4 of students were not in the areas directly affected by earthquakes. Secondly, we know that schools are interested in the best results for their students and will be making cases based on that.
Supplementary question.
Order. Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
Will she commit to ensuring that those students who had to sit NCEA exams on Monday during the aftershocks and those unable to sit the exams because they had been scheduled to sit on Monday will be given an opportunity to sit a fresh exam before the end of the year? If not, why not?
The Honourable Heke Parata.
Mr. Speaker, no, because that is not the advice I have received from the Qualifications Authority, who are the experts on this. It is not a matter of political intervention to determine the academic results of students. That is why we have an independent qualifications authority who operate with integrity and who are respected for that, and they will ensure, along with the schools of these students, that they do the best by them.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Order. Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
Will the completed examination papers for the students who completed scholarship exams on Monday that had already been cancelled be marked, as NZQA has advised on Twitter? If so, how will those results be fairly compared with those of students who will be sitting a different exam at a later date?
The Honourable Hiki Parata.
Mr Speaker, this is an area that I have asked for advice from the Qualifications Authority, and I'm expecting to receive that advice.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
How is it fair to set different exams for different students at different times, given the results of scholarship exams determine the allocation of awards that can be worth tens of thousands of dollars to each student?
The Honourable Hiki Parata.
Mr Speaker, I imagine the irony of the member promoting exactly that course for the NCEA exams, now opposing it for the scholarship exams, has not been lost on this House. And again, I will reiterate that the New Zealand Qualifications Authority takes its role extremely seriously and will ensure, in discussions with schools, that they arrive at the best result in what has been an unanticipated, exceptional, emergency situation.
Question.